Hi everyone, here's the Book Chemist once again. Today I'm reviewing Inland by Thea Obreht, a book that I picked up completely at random without knowing anything about it. I was in the library, I was in an adventurous mood, and I picked it up. The blurbs and the endorsements on the back cover compared it to Toni Morrison, compared it to Cormac McCarthy, compared it to Gabriel Garcia Marquez's 100 Years of Solitude. I was like, Ustiano, need to read this. And I'm very happy I did. It's pretty awesome. Inland is a Western novel that is very much rooted in many of the central themes and aspects of the genre, the uncertainty and hardship of life on the frontier, the terrible clash of civilizations when settlers from all walks of life and all sorts of different origins collide with the native inhabitants of the Western territories of the United States. The nature of violence, institutional violence, the violence of the Indian Wars versus the spontaneous violence of outlaws, of people living on the margins of society, exploiting either the government or other settlers and beyond. It endorses a lot of these themes, but avoids many of the the staler tropes of the genres, if you see what I mean. As somebody who's definitely watched quite a lot of Western and read a handful of them, I found this very new and very, very refreshing. It's first and foremost quite a stunning and surprising novel on a formal level. Inland is a split novel. It follows two different, let's call them protagonists, in parallel alternating sections. Some of these sections are written in the first person and they span quite a long time chronologically. It's the story of one of the two protagonists who narrates the story of their life to someone else who seems to be having some kind of trouble and seems to be quite a peculiar character, and you'll realize why as you read the novel. And they talk about the story of their life, starting from their earliest recollections, traversing the Atlantic from the old world, from Europe, coming to the US with their father, and then very soon falling into a world on the margins of society, breaking the law, being forced to flee from the law, really, and beyond. And the other protagonists, the other parallel sections, are instead written in a third person that follows very closely the co-protagonist, who is a woman living in the Arizona territories, settled there in a farm with her family. Her husband has a printing press. He's a journalist, but they also raise sheep. They try their best to make it in the frontier. And those sections instead are very contained chronologically. In fact, unless I'm mistaken, they all take place in the span of a single day. I think from one morning to the following morning, obviously with plenty of flashbacks exploring this family's history in the territories, how they ended up there, how this woman ended up there and met her husband, what her relationship is with her sons, with a young woman, a relative who's living with them at the moment and who this woman really isn't too keen on, and beyond. The two different sections are both written in very different, very distinct styles, but both of them being at the same time quite virtuosistic, but also effortlessly so. In that sense, I think the comparison to Cormac McCarthy and Toni Morrison is very valid. It's magnificently written in terms of style and language. It's beautiful, but it's not the kind of acrobatic style that I tend to go for. It's not David Mitchell, it's not Michael Chabon. I would say it's not even Jennifer Egan. It's more that type of epic, dense, meaningful, impactful writing that shines occasionally with lyrical passages of extreme beauty. Sometimes it had me on the edge of tears just from the beauty of its descriptions of certain very banal aspects of either everyday life or existence, more broadly speaking. It was quite an intense reading experience, as I think you can probably tell. My issue with parallel books, with novels that follow two parallel protagonists, is that most often what happens to me is that I end up caring a lot for one of them and kind of not really caring at all about the other, so that I kind of want to rush through the sections that follow my least favorite protagonist so that I can go back to the one I like. I remember Eldest by Christopher Paolini was the first book that presented this conundrum to me when I was a teenager, when I first read it. That was the sequel to Aragon. Remember Aragon? I really liked that one as a kid. Whatever. The same kind of happens in Inland too, I must say. I ended up caring for Nora much more than I did for Luri, for the third person Arizona settler much more than I did for the first person narrator outlaw character. But even then, I would say, especially as the book progressed, especially as the novel entered its second half, the beauty of the writing style, just the peculiarity of the story and the very weird places in which it took its characters still made all of it interesting and all of it engrossing. In both of its sections, Inland is a book that carries a very strong sense of physicality. In Nora's sections especially, in the course of this day, we are at the end of a period of drought, and the water on this farm in Arizona has run out. This is a place where you can't really stay outside in the sun for too long, or you'll literally drown in the sun, which I didn't think could happen, but apparently is a thing. And in the midst of this terrible heat, Laura has no water. She has very little water left, and she's leaving it for her sons, for her elderly mother-in-law. She can't drink. And perhaps because I read the novel during a heat wave here in the UK, the idea of going through this very difficult, very effortful life, coping with this extreme heat without any water, just seemed terrible to me. And the book really makes you feel that the difficulty the character is experiencing, the way the hardship of this life ends up impacting her thoughts, her reactions, her actions, her relationships with the other characters. And Luri's story, by all means, is full of details of physical struggle too, of great hardship, wounds. It really makes you feel the full impact of what life on the frontier must have been like. The Western is perhaps the American genre par excellence, and Western movies, Western novel, Western stories always end up conveying, in a way, the full history of the United States in a reduced form, in a bit of a nutshell, or at least they convey the author's view on some of the horrors and some of the hopes that contributed to creating the country. And in Inland, through both of its stories, you really get to experience what the United States was in the eyes of these characters, how peculiar it was as an experiment in living, how odd as a place, especially as seen through the eyes of characters who knew what the old world was like, who had grown up in a place where cities had been there for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and suddenly they were going through this landscape inhabited by people who had lived through completely different civilizations and were now clashing with these settlers who were creating rickety new towns, trying to make their mark on this world, sometimes peacefully, sometimes not. It just conveys the full violence and uniqueness of this experience in ways that are really impactful and really new. To put it differently, it taught me something new about American history that I didn't know. And I want to talk more about that, but it's really hard to do that without spoiling these surprises. And I think you'll just have to experience them in the course of the book. The way the two stories eventually collided and eventually joined each other was also extremely surprising and much more rewarding than I was expecting. The final pages, the closing pages of the book are amazing. They're really stunning. Once again, I was on the edge of tears. It's a good book, guys. I really enjoyed this, and I found it really surprising and, as I said, quite refreshing compared to a lot of similar novels perhaps that I've experienced in recent years. I haven't even mentioned the fact that this is very much a ghost story, and I mean that both in the canonical talking to the undead sort of sense, and in a more, let's call it literary, metaphysical or allegorical or metaphorical, metonymical sense, not melodical, whatever, in the sense that, especially in Nora's story, this book is very much about characters who are not there but should be. Where are they? Are they gonna come back? What's happened to them? Their presence is very much felt and present, even though we can't see them and we can't communicate with them. It's also a ghost story in terms of being a story about some aspects of our past that we can't leave behind. It's a story about a deep, possibly morbid attachment to specific places and the way this weighs on us. It's a ghost story in every possible sense of the term. And it's a great ghost story at that. I really liked Inland. I think it's a great novel. It's quite surprising. I think if you're not scared of a slightly challenging novel, that's still very rewarding, still very exciting, still very engrossing, but will still ask you to maybe suspend your expectations for a little bit, try and balance the two stories until you get a sense of how the two are going to exist in parallel. If you're willing to put in a modicum of effort, I think you're really going to find this rewarding. And if you have any interest in Western fiction or in the history of the American West, how it was settled, how people from all over the world came there to clash and come together, I think it's a great read. If you've read The Tiger's Wife, which is Thea Obreht's, I think, debut novel, and I think is also quite highly regarded, won awards and so on, let me know how that was. Let me know if it's worth it too. And yeah, let me know if you enjoyed Inland as much as I did and what you thought of the novel. Always look forward to discussing it in the comments. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching the video. Bye, guys.